Well, lots of questions at City Hall after three top officials announced yesterday that they're leaving. It comes just days after Mayor Johnson announced plans to, quote, clean house. Aviation Commissioner Jamie Rhee is retiring, Jose Tirado, and the head of the Office of Emergency Management, along with communications, and is headed to the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Also, the chief administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, Andrea Kirsten, is also out. It's not certain if any were pushed out, though, by the mayor.
Joining to discuss that and much more from the week is the host of WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnek.
Hi, guys.
Let's start with that sound of Brandon Johnson,
Yeah.
him talking a little bit earlier this week. Take a listen.
I would have cleaned house faster. There were a number of people that I inherited in my administration, and I was trying to show, godly presentation, that we can work with people who come from other administrations. They don't have to agree with me 100% to work with them in my administration. Yeah, I wouldn't have done that. If you ain't with us, you just gotta go.
So, Paul, with Jamie Rhee and some of the others deciding to go out, is that cleaning house, or they just did it before he could get to them?
Well, as you said, we don't know whether or not this was cleaning house because it's retirement, it's leaving, I've got another position, and so we don't really know in the case of Tirado. But I was surprised you mentioned Jamie Rhee, and that is surprising because she's been there for several years. O'Hare is now undergoing this major project. Not really the best time, I would think, to leave. So whether the mayor, using this moment in a church, the question he was asked was, what would you have done differently? His approval ratings are notably low, and things have not gone very well for him. He always keeps a strong face about things, but to comment there in that public setting was a bit surprising, like get ready, and I know people are worried who's going to get rid of it. Well, stay tuned. That was 3 days later. I have a feeling there's more to come.
Did he seem more casual than he should, you think?
Well, he was in a setting very comfortable for him, right? Church setting with pastors, that's a very comfortable setting for this mayor. So I don't know about that, but I would say that there is more to come because I don't think that's the total hit.
Clearly conflict in that office. Let's move on to another topic. Finally, this week, we got the Michael Madigan verdict. It finally came down with a split verdict. I want to get your impressions about what happens forward with the unresolved charges with his right-hand man, Michael McLean.
Well, let's take McLean first. I don't think anything happens with regard to Michael McLean because the prosecution already has their conviction of him from the ComEd case, right? That was ever before he ever got to this case. For prosecutors, remember I'm a lawyer, work in this area, prosecutors, a win is a win. And so they have their win. I don't think they're going to expend the money and time necessary to go through those charges again. Plus, there's a new boss, new sheriff in town, which is the new attorney general, and she, Pam Bondi, will dictate what the priorities are here. We're getting a sense that areas of corruption and stuff is not where she's going. She's been pulling teams off of those kinds of cases. So I think you're likely to see the teams here being told, don't go there, go with deportation or other kinds of issues that are more of a priority of her and the president. With regard to Madigan, by the way, there'll absolutely be an appeal. Why not? But the appeal will be limited to anything that was raised during the course of the trial by his lawyers. They can't come up with new stuff now or just go in and just say, we're not happy with the verdict. They'll have to point to errors. As we watch the trial fairly closely, I didn't see anything that would suggest a significant error that could lead to an appeal, but I'm not writing the brief, so we'll see what they say, and then obviously it'll be in the hands of an appellate court.
What about a sentence?
So hard to predict right now, but look, for folks who say, and I've had people send me texts and all this kind of stuff and emails just saying he should go away forever and that kind of thing. Look, Madigan was convicted on several things, but he also has a history of, let's call it 40 years in our state legislature where he did lots of good things over the years, and he understood how to get things passed and not push things through that shouldn't have. The judge is going to take all of that into account. It's not just about the verdicts in this case. So the judge is going to look at a sentencing report. It's going to be like this, with interviews with him and everybody who knew him and on and on and on. And in the end, I think you're going to have the judge say, Mr. Madigan, this is what you did that was wrong. You're going to have to pay a price for that. But you've had a career that in many ways should be acknowledged and noted here. My best guess is we see a sentence in that. He'll get a sentence, but I want to see it probably 3, 5, 7 years, somewhere in that world. You're not going to see 20. He could face 20. You're not going to see that.
His age has a lot to do with
He's
that.
He's 82, but there's healthy 82-year-olds in jail. So that wouldn't keep them. imposing a sentence on him.
Let's travel to New York City, shall we, and talk about the mayor there, Eric Adams. The Department of Justice has just...
Good luck spending this one out.
Right. They've just dismissed his cases.
Yeah.
But if we rewind just a little bit, he wouldn't had a visit with Trump a little while ago, and then 7 prosecutors after that decided to resign. They're done because they were told to not follow up with those charges, leave it as is. Where are we going with this?
So I'm going to take off my political hat and put on my legal hat, all right?
Please.
Because I realize that those who are Trump supporters, whatever, will see no problems here. But as a lawyer, here's the issue I have with this, is that what they said to him was, we're going to dismiss your case without prejudice. Those are magic words that mean we may bring this back if we choose to. With prejudice would have meant we can't bring this back. If you don't think you've got strong charges, you don't think you can prove the case, again, a new sheriff in town in terms of Pam Bondi, then dismiss it with prejudice. But the fact that they didn't and wanted to keep the door open raises a question. Why are you keeping the door open? Now, the Attorney General's office and DOJ is essentially saying, well, we just think he's got enough to do as mayor of the city of New York. This gets in his way. I don't know about you, Micah, but I don't know anybody who, if they are charged with something or dealing with it, have plenty of time to do their job. It just comes with the territory, right? Nowhere in that motion to dismiss did they say he didn't do it. We don't think there's enough evidence. They never addressed that. It was about he just has so much to do. The bottom line is it's pretty clear that a deal was made with him, which is that he would work with ICE and that group to basically help them with their deportation
efforts. And no longer be
efforts.
a sanctuary city.
And work towards that. And by the way, he was on, I watched Fox and Friends this morning, and Adams was on along with Tom Homan. And Homan at one point made an interesting comment, which is, hey, you don't do what we agreed to do. I'm going to be up in your office, and we're going to talk this out. And he was a little saltier in his language than that. But essentially, I'm watching it going, what is that all about? Why are we having about this deal that has been struck? Because Adams says no deal was struck. Something went on there that isn't quite kosher. By the way, you're right. 7 people resigned, and this goes back to comments I've made many times on our broadcast. People who work for the DOJ, frontline attorneys, they are not political. They're just not. Yeah, these were people who said, you can't make me do that. I'm not going to do this. I will give up my career. Some of whom, and we're seeing her picture now, by the way, and that's Danielle Sassoon. She was a clerk for Scalia. These are not liberals who are doing this. These are serious lawyers, many of whom have conservative backgrounds, who just understood that had they signed off on that document, their license would have been on the line. In the end, by the way, it was signed off on by an attorney who's just about to retire. He basically made the point, I will take the hit for everybody so that the rest of you don't have to worry about this, because apparently there was a meeting and basically the entire Department of Professional Integrity was told, somebody better do this or you're all in trouble.
Sort of staying on topic here, President Trump says he will abide by the courts as he appeals, but through his proxies, really, like Elon Musk, his actions really say otherwise. And a lot of people argue that we are in a constitutional crisis. How do you see it?
Well, a constitutional crisis is looming. And the reason, and Ray, you're right to point to the court issue, right? A lot of people say it's a constitutional crisis for all sorts of reasons. But here's the thing. And President Trump was asked about this, and he said, I will listen to the courts, and I will appeal as I have to. The concern is that if decisions come down, and even the Supreme Court were to rule against him, if he were to, through advice of whoever, say, you know what, try and enforce this. I'm going to do what the people elected me to do, and I'm not going to listen to the courts. That's when democracy is in trouble. There is no answer, because SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, does not have the power to send out an army, to send out a militia. They have no power. And so essentially, you got to go back to the very earliest case, the first case lawyers learned in constitutional law, Marbury versus Madison. And the bottom line is that that's when John Marshall, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, basically made, we are the branch that determines whether laws are constitutional or not. That decision will rest here. That'll be a real big problem if the president decides not to follow court orders.
Is free speech in trouble here in the United States of America? We know that President Trump banned an AP reporter for coming into the Oval Office for a press conference because the AP says they're not going to call it the Gulf of America, but they're going to keep the Gulf of Mexico. Then J.D. Vance is in Europe talking about, you know, he's chiding free speech and things like that. Are we in trouble here?
Well, you're hearing certainly Democrats say it seems to be free speech for thee, but not for, for me, but not for thee. You can draw your own conclusions. I think you set it out nicely, which is that if you have J.D. Vance, France, in Germany, making comments about the importance of free speech, going after, by the way, our European allies, by the way, and then meeting with the very conservative fascist challenger, because they have elections in about a week in Germany. That expressed some concerns by people, but the bottom line after that is when you do have AP being told, and by the way, some viewers who may have said, but if it's been changed to the Gulf of America, so they're wrong to do it. Well, the truth is there are AP rules about how all of this is to be done, and the bottom line is because most of the world views all of it as the Gulf of Mexico, and there's now that sliver, which is the Gulf of America, that Google was within its, AP was within its realm to call it the Gulf of
Mexico.
Gulf of America. Yeah, Gulf of Mexico,
Yes.
which is what they did. So again, at a minimum, free speech. Do you throw them out of press conferences because they chose not to do it? We have to wonder about the power of free speech. And we're seeing more and more at the Pentagon, a lot of the traditional mainstream media, they've had their offices removed. They can still attend hearings, but they're not in the Pentagon anymore. There's some real changes and more conservative media that are putting in prominent places. For conservatives, that's great. For people who see it, in a more balanced way, that raises questions.
We're going to talk about Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, we're going to have Congressman Mike Quigley to come on and talk about a lot of this stuff, about what's going on in Washington. Certainly, Ray Long is going to come in, the Tribune reporter who wrote a book about Madigan. Yeah, he's going to come in and talk about Madigan and what his legacy will be 10, 20 years from now. What will it look like? And then Joe Ferguson, the president of the Civic Federation, is going to look at the state budget because, as you know, Governor Pritzker will be giving his state of the budget very soon. And the Civic Federation has some ideas of what they think the state ought to be doing, and some will surprise you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, guys.
Good to see you.